In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Westbrook, Jasmine Carter, a dedicated mother of two, lived with her husband, Mayor Michael Carter. Known for her community work and unwavering devotion to her family, Jasmine's life was about to be turned upside down. It all began one evening when she was wrongfully arrested during a routine traffic stop. Jasmine had been driving her daughter home from a friend's house when a police officer pulled her over for an alleged violation. The officer, who had been instructed to make more traffic stops in the predominantly black area of town, falsely accused her of a minor traffic offense and arrested her without cause. Jasmine's frustration grew when the arresting officer failed to provide any substantial reason for the stop, and yet she was charged with a slew of fabricated offenses. The officer, who had a long-standing reputation for racial profiling, had already made up his mind about Jasmine. This was just another case of targeting a black woman in a town where systemic racism was quietly embedded in the fabric of its legal system. Jasmine's husband, Mayor Michael Carter, was a respected figure in the community, known for advocating for equality and social justice. When he was notified of his wife's arrest, he immediately called his contacts at the police station, determined to get her released without any charges. But little did he know, Jasmine's case was already in the hands of someone with a deeply troubling bias, Judge Thomas Reynolds. The following morning, Jasmine stood before Judge Reynolds in the courtroom, feeling uneasy as she was charged with a long list of crimes, many of which she didn't even understand. Judge Reynolds, known for his hardline stance against people of color, immediately demonstrated his racial bias. He dismissed her attorney's pleas for leniency and refused to consider the lack of evidence against her. "You're no different from the others who come through this court," Judge Reynolds sneered, not realizing the magnitude of his words. "People like you think the rules don't apply. This time they will." Jasmine tried to maintain her composure, but she could feel the weight of the judge's judgment. The courtroom buzzed with tension, and the spectators, mostly people of color, watched in silence, knowing how these trials usually went. Jasmine's husband, Mayor Michael Carter, had been kept outside the courtroom, unable to make an immediate impact due to the strict procedures that Judge Reynolds had put in place. Jasmine's lawyer, Sarah Lewis, was fighting an uphill battle. She presented clear evidence that the arrest was unjust, highlighting the inconsistencies in the police report and showing that the charges were fabricated. But Judge Reynolds wasn't interested in justice. His mind was made up. "I have no time for this," Reynolds said, slamming his gavel down. "Jasmine Carter, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison for resisting arrest, assaulting a police officer, and several other charges." Gasps filled the courtroom. The people in the gallery were in disbelief. Life in prison for a traffic violation that wasn't even supported by credible evidence? It was a blatant miscarriage of justice, but Reynolds didn't care. The damage was done. Jasmine was taken away in handcuffs, her life shattered in an instant. Outside the courthouse, Michael Carter was livid. His wife, an innocent woman, was sentenced to life in prison on charges that were completely baseless. But Michael knew something that Judge Reynolds didn't. He was the mayor, and he wasn't going to let anyone, especially not a biased judge, destroy his family. Michael called an emergency press conference, rallying the community and demanding that his wife's case be revisited. "This is not just about my wife," he declared. "This is about the entire system that allows injustice to thrive. I will fight until every stone is overturned, until my wife is freed, and until this town knows that racism will not stand in my administration." As the news spread, Jasmine's case gained national attention. Civil rights organizations, legal advocates, and even prominent politicians came forward to voice their support. The outcry against Judge Reynolds grew louder. The media dug deeper into his past rulings, uncovering a pattern of racial bias and discriminatory sentences. It was clear that Jasmine's case wasn't an isolated incident, but a symptom of a much larger problem. Behind bars, Jasmine struggled to maintain hope. The walls of the prison felt closing in on her, but she refused to be a victim. She wrote letters to her children every day, telling them to stay strong and that justice would prevail. Michael visited her as often as he could, promising her that he would not rest until she was free. The battle for Jasmine's freedom took a dramatic turn when new evidence emerged. A whistleblower, a former court clerk who had worked for Judge Reynolds, came forward with explosive information. The clerk revealed that Reynolds had a secret agenda to sentence as many black defendants as possible to harsh punishments, using racial profiling to inflate charges and increase sentences. The revelations forced a reevaluation of Judge Reynolds' past cases. Jasmine's lawyer, Sarah Lewis, immediately filed a motion for a retrial, citing the new evidence of systemic bias and the judge's potential misconduct. Public pressure mounted, and soon enough, a state investigation into Judge Reynolds' conduct was launched. In the midst of it all, Michael Carter's political influence and public outcry pushed for the immediate removal of Judge Reynolds from the bench. A petition was circulated, and within days, thousands of people had signed it, demanding justice for Jasmine and others like her. The once untouchable judge found himself the subject of multiple investigations, his career unraveling as the truth came to light. After months of legal battles, public protests, and media attention, the day finally came. The court ruled that Jasmine's conviction was a result of racial bias and an unjust trial. Judge Reynolds was removed from the bench, and his previous rulings were called into question, leading to a review of all cases he had overseen. Jasmine was exonerated, and the charges against her were dropped. Her sentence was overturned, and she was released from prison, finally reunited with her children and husband. The victory was a bittersweet one. While Jasmine was free, the scars of her ordeal would remain. But the public's response had sparked a wider movement for judicial reform and the fight for racial equality in the legal system. The case of Jasmine Carter became a rallying cry for those seeking justice for all, regardless of race. In the end, it wasn't just the power of one man's influence that brought change. It was the collective will of a community determined to dismantle racism in the courts. Jasmine Carter's story was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of standing up to injustice, and the unwavering love of a family willing to fight for what's right. As the years passed, Jasmine Carter became an advocate for prison reform and racial equality in the legal system. Her husband, Michael, continued his work as mayor, pushing for policies that would create a fairer, more just society for all. And as for Judge Reynolds, his fall from grace served as a warning to others who thought they could use their position of power to perpetuate discrimination. Jasmine's fight had not only saved her life, but had begun a broader movement for change, one that would continue long after her personal battle was won.